right. We've got many folks joining us from outside of Salesforce. Welcome, welcome. All right, welcome to our third session within the 7-session series for Striving to Thriving with WeThrive.live, with the support from IWL, Integrating Women Leaders. A few announcements to share just as we get things rolling this morning. You can check out the recordings from last week and the week before that, especially from last week, the Rebellious Resilience with Alyssa Bartenbach on Rebecca's YouTube channel. I'll put the link in our chat window here in a moment, but Rebecca has created our very own Salesforce Women's Network playlist on her YouTube channel, so it makes it easier than ever to go back and look at those recordings. Today's session is recorded and will be added there as well. Usually we get that going about 24 hours after the event. For the Salesforce employees that have joined us today, you can also find the recording and all of our other relevant information regarding the series on our Women's Network Indy chatter page. On the Salesforce side, you have myself. I am Kylie Carnes. I'm the Lean In Circles Chair for Women's Network here in Indy. And I'll be keeping an eye out on, for any of the questions or any feedback. Would love to see activity on our chat window. Last week, there was so much feedback, comments, questions. It just made a difference with the event that we had last week. So appreciate that. We also have Rebecca Fleetwood Hession, the CEO and founder of WeThrive.live, who is here to share her wealth of knowledge of how to write your own Thrive story. And last but certainly not least, representing IWL today, we have Diane Bailey-Boulay, who is an IWL board member, IWL Louisville co-chair, and IND, which is Inclusion and Diversity expert. So I'll be running the slides here today, but Diane, you can now go on. I'll proceed through with the slides.
Good morning. Thank you, Kylie. It's really a joy to be here with everybody and to represent the Integrating Women Leaders Foundation. We are so grateful for the partnership we have with Salesforce, and I'm so particularly excited that Salesforce is really focusing right here, right now on our well-being, and really giving us all some strategies and bringing the expertise of people who do this all the time. And I just want to say, I'm, in addition to the work I do with IWL and my company, Scale Excellence, I'm in a evidence-based coaching program right now with a university in California. And one of the things we've learned about is the concept of somatic coaching. And part of that is really becoming in touch with our bodies. And so as I'm about to start, I just wanted to share the idea that maybe this is a really good time to just take a breath and to just really feel where you are right now and give yourself the permission to let go of whatever you might feel you need to grip onto right now. So as I continue, just think about that deep breath into the stomach and taking good care of yourself throughout this session and today. So we're ready to move on from that. So I wanted to do a little fun, like true or false kind of thing first, because I'm all about quizzes and things like that. So one question, true or false, stories are more memorable than facts alone. What do you think? Put it in the chat or however people do that. Yeah, true. Thanks, Alex. Janice. Yeah, true. Yeah, Rebecca, I see it. Kelly, Julie. Yeah, so absolutely this is true. And Linda, thanks for that. Michelle, I'm seeing all the chat coming in now. Yeah, stories are more memorable than facts alone, and that's why they're so important. I would say, in fact, that our brains are wired. They are actually wired for story, which is why we are all very used to the concept of a beginning, a middle, and an end, and always something that really grips our brain. And so stories give us that sort of stickiness. I would call it emotional and mental stickiness. To really understand the facts and give them a more meaningful context to us. So, I don't know about you, I've been in meetings in large companies where there's a spreadsheet and everybody's kind of like peering at the numbers, but what's the story that's really going to make it connect for me and stay and be memorable? So that's why stories are so powerful. So now the other one, fill in the blank. How many times more memorable if you have a story than simply the facts? What do you think that number might be? Anybody want to venture a guess? 33, Linda, thank you. Anybody else? Let's see where we come in on that. 5, thank you, Alex. Julie, 10, Kelly, 10. All right, we got anywhere from 5 to, oh, now we're down to 4 to 33. Rebecca, thank you. Lots of wonderful guesses there. The actual data that we know is that it's 22 times more memorable. Michelle, I wish it was 75. That would be great. But 22 times more memorable than facts alone is a really powerful impact. So, stories are not just sort of nice to have things on the side. And maybe we even think of stories as something that is childish and child's play. But, children glom onto stories because it really means something to them. And it may not be that we're reading kids' stories with lots of data, but the fact of the matter is that those stories are creating worlds within our heads that help us understand the world around us. So yeah, 22 times more memorable than facts alone. Next slide, please. I actually participated in a conference last week that was supposed to be in Berkeley, California, but instead it was on Zoom. But this quote really, it was about bridging divides and healthy communities. And I love this quote by the poet and activist Muriel Rukeyser. The world is made of stories, not atoms. And for me, that was really powerful. So again, speaking to what's the difference? What stories do we tell ourselves? What are the stories we share with each other that creates connection and bond and understanding? What are stories that we need to let go of that we may have told ourselves or told ourselves about others that really aren't serving us or our communities well? I think it's just, again, another powerful way to think about the power of stories. Next slide, please. So at the Integrating Women Leaders Foundation, we're very proud of the work we've done, and Salesforce has been one of our great supporters around this in the conferences, both in Indy and Louisville. And one of our speakers who's been in both cities has been Sarah Pateka. Sarah is one of the first women to have gone to West Point. And can you imagine that? She definitely has stories. And she comes to the conferences and shares some of her strategies around this. And, again, how can storytellers help us as storytellers? It's really about discovering our voices, our ability to increase our influence. Again, inviting, enriching dialogue and conversations with others. There's a huge difference between debate and discussion and dialogue. And dialogue is really about that seeking to understand someone else's perspective. We don't have to agree with it, but simply to understand and be in dialogue with someone is one of the best things we can learn to do, again, for our own selves, for our own well-being, for our communities, and for this world. And also, stories help us as storytellers to heal and to be free of things that we may have believed in the past or that others told us about ourselves or the world that weren't true. So again, stories are a wonderful way to be on a journey of, you had rebellious resilience last week. Stories are part of rebellious resilience. And what I love about resilience is the whole notion that it's really based in thriving and not merely surviving. And so with that, I'm just really excited to introduce you to, and Rebecca, hear your story. You've been introduced, so we can't wait to hear more about Rebecca Fleetwood Hession and your message. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Diane. I appreciate it. First, let me ask, because I had some microphone challenges. Y'all can hear me, right? Okay, good deal. So what's interesting about this collaboration, I love it because we are so integrated, pardon the pun, we are so integrated with our messaging, and I think it just speaks to our desire to really reach a broad audience of women with a message that's going to resonate. So as you were speaking, Diane, even though we just met, it's interesting how just integrated our messages are today. So thank you. Thank you so much for the setup. It's perfect. So as you may have heard before, I'm the CEO of a company called WeThrive.live. We have 3 things that we care a lot about. We want to ban burnout, build community, and boost business for career women. And I want to talk today about your Thrive story, but I want to give you some context first. So, as Kylie showed this next slide around the brain, everything we're going to talk about today, our brains want us to thrive. So every day when we wake up, our brain says, you know what? I got to make sure she survives, but I really want her to thrive. But unfortunately, what's happened is we've gotten stuck in this other place called striving. And as I was doing a lot of research for the work that I do now, I came upon this definition. I'm a writer, I'm a word nerd. I need to know what things mean and why. And when I started looking at the word strive, it actually comes from the word strife. And it means battle and conflict. And yet we've been using it as a moniker for success for decades. And so I want to peel some of that back today and get back to what we originally were wired to do, which is to thrive. And the meaning of the word thrive, I'm going to click over, Kylie, means to grow, prosper, and flourish. And so thrive isn't some airy-fairy easy concept. It's not just some woo post on Instagram. It's an intentional effort to grow, to prosper. And the word flourish actually comes from floral origins, and it means when the stem of a flower reaches up towards the sun and its roots down through the soil. And if you've ever planted a garden or grew up on a farm or have any understanding of what it means to grow something to the point of flourishing, it's a very intentional effort that requires us to create the conditions to thrive. And so I want to look at some of those today. 3 things we're going to cover. We're going to look at, this is not a test. Our stories have struggles and just what it means to connect another piece of our story. So some of our striving ways are rooted in the way that we were educated. And let me just do a quick caveat here. I'm not down on teachers. They're the most beautiful humans on the planet. But unfortunately, the system and the way that we're educated today isn't always giving us a head start in thriving. So school as it exists today was created to get people into the factories faster. It was at the beginning of the industrial age. There was tons of opportunity in front of us. And one of the roadblocks of that was getting people through education. Because prior to our current model of education, we were educated in communities. We were educated with multiple age children telling stories about the communities we lived in, the religions, things that mattered to us. It was more around stories and conversation. And education then needed to get efficient, like the factories were efficient. And so we moved to the model that still exists today. And so I want to look at some of the reasons that we've got to striving. We didn't even know it was happening. It's an unintended consequence of a system that was put in place that we just need to be aware of so we can work to unwind some of the striving ways that we've been taught. So when I say this is not a test, it's actually a story. Your life is a story, not a test. But you think about the way that you were educated. There were right and wrong answers. There was 40 minutes and the class was going to end. You got to get to the next thing. You got to get to graduation. I might not pass. There was a whole lot of pass and fail involved in there. And so the first thing we want to unravel from our education bias is that there's always a right and wrong answer. There are so many right answers. But yet we have this memory of getting the paper back, and you'd worked so hard on it, maybe not. But anyway, getting the paper back. And what were you looking for first? How many red marks were on the page? And so we've just have this memory about, I gotta get it right. And part of your Thrive story is understanding there are a lot of right answers. There's right for you, there's right for me, there's right for Kylie, there's right for us, not right and wrong comparatively based on the grade that we're going to get on the test. Another misconception that we got from our education was that there's a really smart older person at the front of the room that's in charge. And that plays into our work and the hierarchy of org charts and the way that that plays out. But the fact is, you and your uniqueness and your story is important no matter where you sit in an organization. You don't have to wait to be promoted to the teacher to matter. And so our stories matter, whatever chapter of life that we're in. So our stories encompass our brains, and our brains are actually in charge of our heart and our emotion. And as Diane said, our brains process information based on a story. And as we get information about the story, we have feelings about that story. And it's in those feelings that we start to put it into what I call this big story center of rooms that we have in our brains. So I picture that our brain is like this huge library, and it has all these rooms in it. And it's everything we've ever learned. It's TED Talks we've watched, classes we've taken, conversations we've had, struggles that we've had. All these things through all of our lives, it just goes into this big story center. And then it starts to get compartmentalized and categorized. And when we need information, our brains really bring us what we need when we need it. But yet we've been programmed that we got to study for the test and we got to know all the things. And I'm not going to raise my hand unless I've studied for the test. And I'm here to tell you that your brain already has this amazing Thrive story that it started for you. And when you lean into the confidence and the understanding that you've learned so much in your life already that is available to you at the ready. And when we relax and lean into that, it gives us far more confidence. So as we go through some of the things we're going to cover today, I want you to have some time to do some reflection and to think about some things about your Thrive story. So if we think about kind of our anchor words of today, I want those to be in reflection and connection. So if you want to take a minute and just grab a pen and your journal, or just open up, I think it's Quip that you said, Kylie, that you use to type some notes, whatever it is, here in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to think about some things about your Thrive story. All right, so this is a continuum that represents the different things that your brain's looking for every day in order for you to thrive. And I'm not going to go through this in immense amounts of detail today, but I just want to show it to you as a backstory of what the process that I'm taking you through. So the reflection aspect of your brain, let's go back one more yet, Kylie, let's hold on to her for a minute. Thanks. The reflection part of your brain is really, how are we feeding ourselves? Food, water, shelter is our basic survival, but there's also how we do that. And I love that Diane started with breathing, because if she wasn't going to do it, I was. So this is perfect. I love this, because we have been in a situation in this sheltering in place that has put us far more in touch with our bodies in a surprising traumatic experience. But I hope that the reflection that we get out of it is to carry forward what it means to truly understand our emotions and how they're connected to the food we eat, the breaths we take, the hydration. It's just our biological sense. Self-care isn't bath bombs and booze, y'all. Self-care is about making sure that we understand the connection between how we feel and how we take care of ourselves in a really basic, practical way. But striving has led us to believe that those things aren't nearly as important as achievement. And that's the biggest bullshit lie ever that's gotten us in all kinds of trouble. And so we want to just peel it back to the basics to say, when I care for myself, my emotions are better, my results in the way that I'm working are better. It's a big part of our lives. Another part of reflection is we need to feel safe with our emotions and our ideas and the things that we think about. And that's called psychological safety. And Salesforce, I know, does a great job of making sure that you have the kind of culture and the kind of leadership where they want you to feel safe and they want you to be able to share your ideas openly. And that's a great thing to work for a company that does that. Not everybody does. But one of the things that gets in the way of our psychological safety is what I call the little bitch in our head. And she's that voice, and you can go ahead and flip to her picture. She's that voice in our head that when we get ready to say something or do something, we think, I don't know if we should do that. Maybe we should back up. I'm not sure if this matters or not. And you know what? She's always going to be there. You can't out-career her. You can't out-paycheck her. You can't out-achieve her. We all have her. I even have watched Brené Brown in her Instagram story stand backstage and fight the little bitch in her head about standing on stage in front of all those people. Like, there's no amount of success, striving success often, that eliminates that imposter syndrome or eliminates that other voice in our head. And so we have to make friends with her, personify her. And so I recommend that she can get in the back seat with a seatbelt and a snack, but she doesn't get to drive. So since she's always going to be there, let's just give her a name, personify her, and be like, girl, you need to just get in the back. I got this thing, right? So the first thing that I would love for you to take a minute and reflect on is, what does the little bitch in your head say often? We all have one that is kind of the reoccurring theme. Some of them are contextual and situational, but my little bitch theme is, who does she think she is? And I'll tell you why. I grew up on an acre of land on my grandfather's farm in a mobile home. There is no reason, based on what I've now learned about quote unquote successful people, that I would have grown up to achieve the degree of success that I have. I did my education backwards. I had a 6-figure executive job before I got my degree. I did everything wrong in the sense of the way that we have been taught to expect success to come. So even though I've won awards, I've done all these things, I've had an amazing career, there's still that part of me that questions, did I get enough brownie badges when I was in the school to deserve where I'm at? And so my reoccurring theme is, little bitch says, who does she think she is? And so you probably have one for yourself. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes here to think about, reflect on, what's the reoccurring theme of that little bitch in your head? Just take a minute or two. And if anybody wants to be courageous and type theirs into the chat box, I would be super grateful. Thank you, Linda. You said that yours tells you that you don't have what it takes. Totally get it. Got to acquire more to be worthy of it. Diane says she's no better than she should be. In Northern English, put down. Oh my gosh! So yours even has some culture to it. So that's fun. Julie, am I leaning in enough or not enough? Julie, I love that you shared that. I think it really reflects back to this: there are right and wrong answers for everything. Even when we're trying to do things to care for ourselves, is it enough or is it not enough? Am I doing it right? Suzanne says, a lot of terrible things that I would never say to another human being. That little bitch is courageous with her thoughts, isn't she? Absolutely. I'm often thinking that to myself. I said to my client the other day, who was really struggling with this little bitch in her head, I said, I want you to go stand in the mirror and I want you to ask yourself if you would say that to someone you loved, and really think about what that means to believe her. So that's the next step. As you think about this theme that occurs, I want you to ask yourself, is it true? Do you have evidence that what she says to you is true? Or is it a part of the story that we make up? Because when our brain processes information on story, it has to fill in all the blanks of the story. So if we're not sure about something, if we're uncertain, our brain says, let's just fill in the blanks. And unfortunately, oftentimes that's where the little bitch gets her voice and the space to come in. So we have to stop and ask ourselves, is it true? So when you look at that theme that you wrote down for yourself, do you have evidence of that? Is that really going to happen? And if it even has happened, maybe some traumatic experience has started to inform your voice in your head. And that happens. I can tell you some dumb stuff that I've done that I would think I will remember forever, but it's not my story. It's just something that happened. So we have to take control of our voices that we tell ourselves. The other reflection thing that I want to look at today from your story is we are each, every one of us, unique. We're each hardwired with unique gifts, talents, and abilities. And these are not about, let's stay on that last slide, Kylie. These unique gifts, talents, and abilities are not your job title, your achievements, the awards you've won. They are the aspects of your life that you may use to achieve. But I'm going to tell you my story and how I got to care deeply about these topics. I left a wildly successful 20-year career with the Franklin Covey organization. I sold $35 million. I had shared the stage with Stephen R. Covey when he was alive. God rest his soul. I had voice to the CEO. I have my innovation is in a best-selling business book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution. I was kind of all that in a bag of chips for a while. And still always had that voice in my head. But I was comfortable enough in my career and my company that it was comfortable. And achieving was striving, hustle, all the things while I was raising kids. Like I had normalized the hustle and grind. And when I left that organization to start my own business, it was supposed to be this exciting new chapter that I was writing to, explore some of the things I wanted to write and speak about. And the day I left my career, I had a home office, I always have, and it was 6 p.m. on a Friday, and I closed out my 20-year career alone in my office with the click of a laptop. And I looked around my office and I thought, this is it? This is how it ends? I was furious for a minute. Where was the parade? Why hadn't the CEO put it on his calendar to call me at exactly 6 p.m. when I was closing out my day at Eastern time? Why? What? And I had chosen to leave. This was my own choice that I was making to go into this next chapter of my life. But I had that moment of thinking, this can't be it. So I did what any woman does when she's feeling completely dissed. I went to my counter and I poured a really tall glass of Cabernet, and I was going to have my own little pity party. And I did for a minute. And then I said to myself, this is part of the lesson. This is what you're learning moving into this next chapter. You are not your achievements. I was saying to myself, I said, you still possess all of the talent that you've had achieving in this last organization. You can now just take this with you and use it in a different way. And that's a beautiful thought. But there was this reality that said, I don't know how to introduce myself. I don't have a business card. I don't know who I am without a title and a big company logo and all of the achievements that people had known me for 20 years. I'm starting over. And that's when I had to just rattle myself into this reality of, no, I wasn't starting over. I was just writing the next chapter. But we have this education bias that says we always start over, and we don't. We just keep moving forward using the gifts and talents that we've acquired along the way in our story to serve in a beautiful way. So as you click forward, Kylie, our gifts are meant to be given. It's not about achievement. I want people to know that your Thrive story is within you all the time. It's not waiting on approval. It's not waiting on a glass award. Now, let's look at unique gifts, talents, and abilities, because it's not about your title and your role. Mine are, as an example, my 3 top, and I've worked hard to really understand these and make sure that I use them intentionally. So my top 3 unique gifts and talents. 1, my optimism, sometimes annoyingly so. But it goes with me wherever I go. It helps me in parenting. It helps me as an entrepreneur. It helps me as a coach and a consultant. It helps me as a neighbor, because there's this guy down the road that I really don't like, and I have to just optimistically say, you know what, I'm sure there's something wonderful about him. So that helps me there too. Like, my optimism always helps me. The second thing that is uniquely gifted, talented for me is not uniquely that nobody else has it, but my combination of gifts and talents is what makes me unique. I'm a connector. When I meet you, I will immediately think of 3 more people that I think you should meet that would be helpful to you and that would be a great addition to your life. And I just can't do life without connections. I also am a gift is I can take a lot of complex ideas and distill it down into a simple symbol or metaphor or concept, which makes me a good writer. It makes me a good coach. It makes me a good consultant. It makes me a good mom. Like, all of those things are how I move through the world. And I'm looking for ways that I can use and serve my gifts to another, which is where we start to get connection. So I'm connecting by, I carry around my box of gifts and I'm like, who can I give these to today? So I want you to take a moment and I want you to jot down the first 2 or 3 things that come to mind when you think about your unique gifts, talents, and abilities. Ready, go. And as always, I would love for you to share if you feel compelled. Empathy, compassion, and unconditional love. Oh, Linda, I love that.
Yeah.
While you're thinking through yours, I'll tell a quick story about empathy being a top gift for my son, who is a 22-year-old. One of the things I'm most proud about is being able to share with my kids that this idea of we're each hardwired with unique gifts and talents. And I believe our gifts came from God. And I've always told them that their responsibility is to use their gifts. And so I'm trying to unwind that stress that they feel around achievement. So one of my most proud aspects of motherhood is when you ask my 22-year-old son what his superpowers are, he will say empathy is his best one. So I love that you put that first. That's beautiful. Kylie says reliable, considerate, collaborative, connection, coaching, and kindness, genuine, pragmatic, joy, and laughter. These are so good. These are so good. Another story I'll tell you, Nicole Bush from Nicole Blairware, who's going to be doing a session in this series in a few weeks. She's a fashion stylist and a creative director for events and things. So you can imagine with sheltering, she's not been able to do her practical work. She's not in closets organizing for people. She's not dressing people. She's not on stage. She's not doing the things that normally give her a sense of affirmation for herself. And luckily we've done this work together. And so when she was feeling the impact of this immediately in sheltering, I said, okay, go back to your gifts. And one of her first unique gifts and talents is joy. And so we started to look at how she could show up with her clients and on social media with a joyful message, which was most important and needed more than any other time in the world. And so she was able to continue to use her gifts to inspire by bringing joy, not just dressing people for the stage. Janice says connection, empathy, authenticity. I love it. I love it. So now when you think about who you are and your Thrive story, instead of thinking you need to go accumulate another degree or take another class or read another book, this is the opportunity to hone in and say, how can I intentionally use these gifts every single day in all aspects of my life? Because your brain is looking for you to use what you're great at. And that says to your brain, yay, she's thriving. And when that happens, you start to have the emotions associated with thriving. And so it's not about the check off the list or accomplishing this next thing or all the aspects that we've been taught in this industrial age model. It's about showing up and giving your gifts. So as we were sheltering in place, I had this awareness on Twitter one day, which is a scary dumpster fire most days during this whole thing, but silly me, was scrolling through and I recognized that there was, people that were sheltering in place alone. And I'm lucky my adult kids are here. I'm not alone, but I thought, oh my gosh, as a connector, the loneliness would just be horrible. And so I reached out and said, hey, any women that are sheltering alone, send me a message and I'll mail you a Badass Women's Council t-shirt, which is my podcast and my brand. And I had several that took me up on that offer and I wrote them a little note. And so that gave me a sense of I was giving back. When we give from our place of giftedness, we get this huge sense of satisfaction. I had another client who loves to do floral arrangements. And so she went and gathered a bunch of flowers from Kroger and made a bunch of arrangements and dropped them off to people. So when you really know who you are, that's the start of your Thrive story. So I want you to keep this list of your gifts and talents that you've started somewhere in front of you where you can be reminded that this is uniquely who you are, which also means it's uniquely what the world needs. When we don't show up with our gifts and talents, we leave huge gaps in the world because the most kind and generous thing we can do is to give from our place of giftedness. All right, let's go to the next page, Kylie. Your stories also have struggles. This is just fact, y'all. It just is what it is. And the good news is our struggles are meant to teach us and inform us and be a part of our story as much as the good stuff. So many of you may have heard of, go ahead and go to the next slide, this concept of the hero's journey. In fact, many great books, movies, Star Wars, Harry Potter were built on this model. And it basically says that you are just kind of moving through your life. You're at the top, things are kind of going okay. And you get on this adventure, this call to adventure. And all of a sudden you find yourself in a struggle, which is the bottom. And it's in that struggle that someone or a group of someones usually comes along and helps you through that struggle. And by them helping you through it, you are changed. You have learned something about yourself that has made you even better than when you went out on the adventure. So our struggles are meant to teach us and help us grow. And sometimes we're the hero in the story. Sometimes we're the one that's going along and doing all the things. And sometimes we're the guide who is sent to help the hero through some crap.
Mhm.
And so as you think about the struggles that you've had in your life, those have been chapters of your story. And I'm guessing that there have been guides that have come along in that struggle. So I want you to take a minute now and jot down some of the struggles that you've had. You can probably name them. I've got the divorce chapter. I've got the finances are really scary chapters over my life. I've got the move to a new city chapter. Jot down where have the struggles been and maybe even name it as a chapter. And then also write down beside it, who guided you through that? Who came along to help? Take a minute for that. As you think through the struggles, have you ever gotten surprised by who showed up as your guide? You ever had that situation where you've got your kind of group of friends and your core people, but somehow in the midst of a struggle, there's some unexpected person or people that show up? I know that's been the case for me. And I say that because we need to be open to receive help. Because our story of struggle matters both for us and for who comes along to help us. And that's how we get authentic connection in the world. Not about achievement, but about the humanity of things, that when we needed something, someone said, I'm here to help you, and I've got some things that I can do to support you. Because our guides, and this is a great thing to remember when you're the one that's guiding someone else, it's not about fixing them. We're not here to fix people. When we show up as the fixer, we imply brokenness. When we show up as the guide, we say, I see you. Because the deepest human need that we have is to be seen, heard, and known for our unique story. So when someone sees us in our struggle and just comes along beside us and says, I'm here to walk with you in it, that's a beautiful connection. And sometimes we want to be the fixer because we care so much. So the unintended consequence of being a fixer is we come at it with such love and good intention, but actually we don't get the benefit, and they don't get the benefit unless we just come along and guide and say, I see you. I hear you. I'm here to listen. Because listening is the superpower of connection. When we can learn to listen with love and connection and not judgment or fear, it is the most healing thing that we can do for another. All right, let's go to the next slide, Kylie. Our stories have chapters, as we said. Sometimes we have a struggle chapter, sometimes we have a mountaintop high chapter. But really what we're trying to do is just connect to the next piece of our story. So I want to talk this last piece through. Let's click to the next slide about the differences between marbles and puzzles. So if you picture your hand with a handful of marbles, all shiny and perfect. If you were to take that handful of marbles and turn it over on the table in front of you, what would happen? They'd all roll away. Perfect doesn't stick together very well. But if you were to have a handful of puzzle pieces with all their jaggedy ass edges and the dust from the bottom of the box, and they're all different, and you turned those over and you looked at them and you got really intentional and said, how can I make these connect? There are two characteristics of a puzzle once it's put together. One, it's far stronger. And two, it's far more beautiful. So instead of feeling like our story is about achievement and how can I do the next thing and check the next thing off the list, really it's just about how can we connect one more piece of our puzzle to theirs? How can I show up with my unique gifts and talents and my unique struggles and say, I'm here to serve, I'm here to guide, I'm here to be a part of your story. And when we do that work of looking in the mirror and reflecting on our story, and we realize how powerful and sometimes how challenging it is, and all the things that we've overcome, then we can look at the others with this courageous curiosity about their story. That instead of saying, how can I compare myself to you and want to be like you, but to say, how can I connect with you? How can we support each other in a beautiful way? So as you think about your Thrive story, I know you are career women who want to do beautiful things. Me too. And I want to make some money in the process. This isn't about abandoning all of our drive and our aspiration to do beautiful work, but it's giving ourselves the opportunity to be ourselves. Because if we spend time trying to hide our struggles and trying to be perfect, we don't just hide our struggles. We hide our gifts. We hide the ability for us to come along someone who needs us, who didn't know that you had that struggle. So instead of waiting until you're caught up, which isn't a thing, caught up isn't a thing. If you're caught up, you're dead, y'all. Like, it's never gonna happen. We have this idea that I can't live my life or I can't do the beautiful things until I'm caught up. I haven't been caught up since 1987. Driving home from Florida, I was changing jobs, changing cities, coming back from my wild, crazy days, living on the beach. And for about 12 hours, I smoked Virginia Slim cigarettes and sang Bon Jovi and Rat tunes and had not a care in the world. And it hasn't happened since. You are a high achieving woman. That's a great thing. The minute you would even think about being caught up, you would dream up some new thing that you want to do. So stop waiting to be caught up. Instead, just ask yourself, where can I connect next? Where can I use my gifts? Where can I go into a project at work? And how can I use those gifts well? What's my next piece on my puzzle to my Thrive story that I need to connect? And as we start to gather more and more pieces of our puzzle, that's where we start to see our value. We start to see the cover of our Thrive story box taking shape. We start to realize the more that we show up as ourselves, we start to gather all this experience and all these things that we've learned, continue to listen to podcasts and watch TED Talks and take classes, but don't do it to think about achievement. Do it thinking about what new knowledge can I gain? What relationships can I use to build a stronger, more beautiful piece of my puzzle as I connect with information and others? And ultimately, as we do that, meaning and purpose just means that all of a sudden I've got enough pieces of my puzzle put together that I know who I am. And now I'm all about going to serve others with my story. So you may be at the beginning stages of gathering puzzle pieces and understanding who you are and your story. Or you may have most of that filled in and you're just looking for the other places that you can connect. Let's flip to the next slide. But connecting is about impact, not checking things off the list. So the last place I want you to reflect today is when you look at your unique gifts and you look at your story of struggle, where can you have the most impact with your authentic self, with your Thrive story? Who needs you? Who's in that inner circle? Because when we show up for those that we can intentionally impact in a beautiful way of connection, not fixing, the ripple effect on the world is a beautiful thing. So take a moment and just think about who can you connect with really intentionally over the next couple of weeks, whether it's practically helping somebody solve a problem at work, on a project, or whether it's your kids or your spouse or your neighbor. But where can you show up looking for a place to click and connect over the next couple weeks? Jot down a couple of ideas. Anybody want to type in the chat anything that came up? I love when people start using their gifts intentionally and knowing the why behind what they do. I had a lady in a crowd at a keynote speech. God, I miss being in a crowd at a keynote speech. I'm not going to lie. But we were talking about just being intentional with our actions and knowing why we're doing things and why things are important. And I said, look at your task list and find something on there that if you were to do it more intentionally and do it from a place of giving your gifts, that you would feel different about it. And she raised her hand and she said, I have been dreading that I have to go across town to go to Kohl's to get my husband a pair of khaki pants to wear to a casual wedding. I've been dreading it all day. And she said, it sounds so ridiculous. She said, but now that I'm thinking about it, his niece is one of his closest family members and she loves her uncle. And now I'm thinking about driving across town, excited about going to buy khaki pants for a beautiful woman that's getting married in a couple of weeks. So it's not going to take tasks off your list, but sometimes it just has us doing them in a far more emotional, good way. Anybody else have any stories or thoughts around the impact of connecting in that way? All right, let's click to the next slide, Kylie. Oh, I missed some comments. Reframing the why. Thinking about. Oh, I love that. I've been thinking about being a hospice volunteer. Maybe it's time to look at this with intention. Yes, I love it. That plays perfectly into this next slide, which is be passionately, courageously curious. Be curious about yourself and be curious about how you connect with the others in your life. Also be curious about who gets sent to guide you along and be open about their story, connecting with yours. We have this love affair with planning, and I was actually addicted to my hustle and grind life and thought if I didn't plan it out, it must not be worthy. And now that I've opened myself up to the connections in my life that I had never even thought of or intended, like this one today, the reason I'm here is because Kylie was in a class that I taught a while back, and we became friends and had coffee, and this opportunity came up. None of that would have happened. It wasn't on my business plan, y'all. But it was a piece of the puzzle that needed to connect. For her and I, she's taught me so much. And then we've been able to connect pieces of the puzzle for others. So as you think about your Thrive story, this last slide to depict this idea of your puzzle, the picture on the cover of your puzzle box will start to unfold. Don't freak out if you don't know where all the pieces are yet. Just be curious and go look for ways that you can connect. So speaking of connection, let's stay connected. I want you to stand tall in your story. I want you to be confident. I want you to have this sense of thriving every single day. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so we can stay connected. We can stay connected through the podcast, the Badass Women's Council podcast. I'd love you to subscribe and be a listener. We can stay connected through just basic social media, Instagram kind of stuff. But I also have an online community that you can subscribe to called the Badass Women's Council.community. And there's a beautiful way, that's a beautiful way for you to meet other high achieving women that are looking to do beautiful things like you are. And as Kylie said, we've got the YouTube channel set up, and you've got your own channel. You can see there at the bottom left, the Salesforce Women's Network, where anything that we're doing here in this series will show up there. So as we close out, any final questions or thoughts that I can answer?
This is definitely going to be one that I go back and listen to again. My notepad is full.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I just put a direct link to Rebecca's YouTube channel for the playlist that she's created for us where these recordings are housed. Any last comments before we wrap up our event for today?
Thank you, Julie. Thanks for being here, y'all. I know you have lots of things on your plate, so thanks for making the time today.
All right, so next week we have Alex Perry. And she's with us today, as always a supporter, where she's going to be talking to us about communication and confidence. I can't wait for that. Cannot wait. Same time, 10 a.m. Eastern on Thursday. Our last event is going to be June 18th with Rebecca as she wraps up this 7-part series with Your Story Matters. So truly grateful for the support. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Diane. This was a wonderful session as always.
Thanks, y'all.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.